Part 51. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shida Di. Chapter 502. Friendly Fleet. Since the Meridian is an asset of the Academy, then the friendly fleet mentioned by the Meridian is. When Gao Qiang was thinking this, a huge fleet suddenly appeared in this primeval forest. The storm caused by the other party's leap directly took itself as the origin and flattened all the towering trees in the surrounding area. Countless prehistoric creatures fled in all directions. In a flash, the scene that was just green and lush suddenly seemed a little empty. The speed of pursuit is quite fast. Zinke glanced at the scene outside. At this moment, the Meridian has been surrounded by the Tiangong fleet. The sense of oppression brought by the Tiangong fleet is also very sufficient. Because of its small size, the Meridian is only slightly larger than a cargo hatch of a conventional warship. In front of the Tiangong fleet, the Meridian is as small as an ant. Inside the flagship, Yin Chang looked at the surrounded Ziwu, and turned to remind the captain of the Tiangong fleet, Su Changping, the other side still has hostages. Su Changping nodded, indicating that he knew. At the same time, he gave an order to the messenger in the bridge. Tell the entire fleet not to attack yet. As the order was issued, the Tiangong fleet only intercepted the engine of the Ziwu and maintained its own encirclement. It did not continue to take the next step. Yin Chang took a deep breath and said to Su Changping, "Let me talk to the other party." If possible, she hopes to solve this problem by communication. At the same time, Yin Chang also prepared her own conditions. As long as the safety of the hostages can be guaranteed, and the data and prototype of the Ziwu will not be leaked, then the intruder who planned this terrorist incident can be allowed to safely leave the control range of the Academy. At this time, a message popped up on the control panel of the Ziwu. The flagship of the Tiangong fleet has sent us a communication request. The other party seems to want to negotiate with us. Negotiation? Gao Yuan snorted coldly, it's better to talk without success than to waste time. The implication is that there is no point in communicating with the other party. Zinke also frowned, as if he didn't expect to be stopped by the fleet that came after the Academy just after leaving the Academy. How much time do we have? Zinke turned his head and asked Gao Yuan. Gao Yuan shook his head, not much. He handed the light screen in his hand to Zinke. After a quick glance, Zinke frowned even more. Another unexpected mistake has occurred. In that case, we can only force our way out. As he said that, Zinke immediately refused to communicate with the Tiangong fleet. At the same time, Grandma Zuzu and Dakai also took action. Grandma Zuzu looked at the location of the Tiangong fleet. After 10 minutes, they will be unable to pursue us for the time being. Dake went to the back of the Meridian and removed the precision electronic components one by one. Clang clang. The sound of metal collisions continued to be heard. Until Dakai turned around and smiled and made an OK gesture. All components related to intelligence have been removed. Gao Yuan nodded thoughtfully. The loss of intelligent control components is equivalent to the loss of the ship's safety system? Then it's up to me next. As he spoke, Gao Yuan quickly operated on the control panel of the Meridian with both hands. Generally speaking, in order to ensure the safety and stability of ships, they will not cause stupid things such as self-destruction due to erroneous operations. A large number of intelligent control components will be arranged for prevention and control. Among them, the components that prevent ships from making continuous jumps are also included. Just because continuous jumps are a huge challenge to the outer shell and internal hardware of the ship, a careless operation can easily cause the ship to be scrapped or lose its route. But in this situation, there is no need to care so much. The flagship of the Tiangong fleet, Su Changping frowned and turned to Yin's Hang. The other party refused to communicate with us. How could this happen? Yin's Hang frowned. She could not understand the brain circuits of the invaders. In the case of only a glimmer of hope, Isn't communication a good way for both parties? However, at this moment, someone in the bridge suddenly exclaimed. Ziwu has jumped away. What? Yinzhang and Su Changping were stunned, as if they were not sure of the news they heard. How much time has passed? Even a micro spacecraft like Ziwu can't be cooled down so quickly, right? Gao Qiang doesn't know, but don't they know yet? Outside the main base of the Academy, it is connected to a whole multiverse controlled by the Academy. Each of these worlds is relatively independent, and only the Academy's jump engine, or engines of the same level, can move here. But even so, it is still risky to shuttle in the multiverse. If you are not careful, you may fall into the interlayer or crack of the multiverse. This is also the meaning of the Academy setting up jump cooling. There is only one possibility for the next jump to be carried out so quickly. Su Changping's face turned ugly. The other party destroyed the security system of the Meridian. This behavior is really too risky. But in addition to this, Su Changping still had many puzzles. For example, why the other party could easily dismantle the security system in such a short time without hindering the use of the spacecraft. And how did the other party successfully start the engine under the interference of the Tiangong fleet? The mysteries of Ziwu became more and more in Su Changping's eyes. But because of this, he became very interested in the invaders in Ziwu. Pass my order, catch up with them. Although Ziwu had already run a distance in advance. But Su Changping was not very worried that Ziwu would be out of his control. After all, this is the home court of the Academy. Let alone a few invaders, even if a real multiverse-level god came here, he would have to be skinned several layers of skin before escaping. However, just when Su Changping was thinking about this, his subordinates brought an embarrassing message. When you gave the order, a dimensional storm just happened to blow through the multiverse, affecting our positioning function. Even if we ignore the safety protocol, we need 20 seconds to restore the jump positioning. How could a dimensional storm suddenly blow through? Su Changping frowned. He looked at the place where the meridian just disappeared, and murmured, "Did you plan this?" And the meridian mentioned by Su Changping was now quickly shuttling through countless different worlds. The picture in front of Gao Qiang's eyes changed almost every 10 seconds. The mountains covered by blizzards, the land completely swallowed by the sea, and the dazzling starry sky. Gao Qiang himself didn't know how many worlds he had passed by. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 503. However, Su Changping was right. This was the Academy's territory after all. The Ziwu shuttled very quickly, but the Academy's reaction speed was not slow at all. Soon, with the Ziwu shuttle again, Gao Qiang and others entered a completely dark world. The jump engine is restricted and is trying to cross the protocol. The electronic sound of 401 came from the control panel, reminding everyone that they were temporarily controlled here. At the same time, in the dark world, a series of data arrays suddenly lit up. It's the black box world created by the infinite-level computer. Gao Yuan confirmed the current situation at a glance. Seeing Gao Qiang puzzled, he continued to explain, "This is a unique method of the Academy. By using infinite-level computers to crack space, the Academy can create a completely empty world. This method is usually used by the Academy to conduct world origin experiments in the multiverse, but I didn't expect it to be used to trap you and me now. The opponent is an infinite-level computer. In the game between the two sides, 401 should not be able to escape so quickly." Gao Yuan narrowed his eyes and looked at the position directly in front of the meridian. "And in my opinion, the preparations made by the Academy will never be limited to what we see." As Gao Yuan's voice fell, an extremely large floating building also slowly emerged from behind the data matrix. Xin Qi clicked his tongue twice. "I didn't expect the Academy to open the space-time fortress. It seems that our position in their hearts is quite important. however, facing the meridian, which is close at hand. Considering that the other party has taken hostages, the Academy is still prepared to give priority to negotiations. A communication message was quickly sent over. This is the space-time fortress. Dark Star units that see this notice are ordered to give up resistance immediately, otherwise they will bear the consequences. Threatening us, Grandma Zuza narrowed her eyes. Perhaps she felt pressure in front of the Dark Star fortress, and her expression was no longer so kind. Grandma, I hate it most when others threaten the people around me. As she said, Grandma Zuza raised the crutches in her hand and wanted to predict something else. However, at this moment, ouch! With a cry of pain, Chin Sui, holding the disaster, fell into the cabin of the meridian. It hurts, it hurts. Chin Sui rubbed his buttocks, looking like he had fallen badly. Then he found that everyone's eyes were looking at him. Chin Sui scratched the back of his head embarrassedly and smiled. So many people are here. Then he saw Gao Qiang, and Chin Sui's eyes lit up. Morning, Lord. How did you get here? Zinke looked at the girl hanging on Gao Qiang's arm and couldn't help asking. At the same time, the doubt in his heart deepened. Because Chin Sui's arrival was obviously not part of Zinke's plan. Well. Chin Sui held her lips with her hand and thought carefully. Just a little accident. What about her? Zinke glanced at Disaster. Is she also an accident? Facing the giant Dark Star fortress, Disaster pursed his lips and cried out. The next moment, undercurrents surged in the black box world. Countless strange constructs suddenly appeared in the void and attacked the Dark Star fortress. Dangerous hostile units detected, determined to be unable to communicate. Attack allowed. As the Dark Star fortress launched an attack, countless data streams floating in the black box world began to accumulate towards the constructs. Whenever the data stream touched the constructs, those strange constructs would be instantly analyzed and turned into the most primitive form and dissipated directly. This was a mathematical weapon attack launched by an infinite-level computer, and it was also a deterrent-level weapon in the hands of the Academy. There is almost no known defense system that can survive the attack of such a weapon. But as the disaster continued to cry, the structures that emerged in the void were almost endless, giving the Dark Star Fortress no chance to focus on the meridian. At this time, the prompt sound of 401 suddenly appeared. The Forbidden Agreement has been successfully crossed, and the ship is currently allowed to continue to jump. Gao Yuan immediately slapped the control panel in front of him. Let's go. With a burst of contraction, the meridian disappeared in the cage built by the infinite-level computer. It was not until then that the Tiangong fleet arrived late. The other party is one step ahead of us again. Su Changping and Yin Shang's faces were not very good. Whether it was the stolen meridian or the abducted honorary professor in their main base, it was intolerable for them. Keep chasing. Su Changping glanced at the Dark Star Fortress that was still dealing with the structure, and made a prompt decision. He concluded that the other party should not have escaped far after being intercepted by the Dark Star Fortress. As long as the Tiangong fleet doesn't have any accidents, it shouldn't be a problem to catch up with the other party. With the Tiangong fleet chasing him relentlessly, Gao Qiang once again entered a situation of shuttling between different worlds. But this time, the Tiangong fleet seemed to be serious. Su Changping divided the entire fleet into different teams, and each team jumped to a different world. In this way, no matter where Gao Qiang continued to jump to in the multiverse, he would be blocked by the Tiangong fleet at the fastest speed. This is the advantage of the Tiangong fleet in terms of numbers, and also the biggest disadvantage of Gao Qiang. Discover the suspected target, execute the interception. Finally, in a world paved with asteroid belts, the meridian where Gao Qiang was located was blocked by a team of the Tiangong fleet. The jump function was intercepted again. Before 401 breaks through the new limit, the meridian can only travel at the normal cosmic speed. But this speed cannot escape under the eyes of the academy. Gao Yuan pulled up the light curtain he carried with him in the cabin. We are about to leave the scope of the academy, just one step away. While speaking, Gao Yuan waved his hand, and a spherical cover was formed on the light curtain screen with the main base of the academy as the center. And the current location of the meridian is just stuck at the edge of the cover. Just one step away from breaking through this layer of cover. But we don't have much time. Gao Yuan glanced at the meridian radar. In the meridian radar, more and more ships were marked as friendly units. It seems that after successfully intercepting the meridian, the Tiangong fleet's large forces directly surrounded them. We will give you one last chance. As the flagship of the Tiangong fleet appeared, the negotiation communication was transmitted again. This is our last warning. If you try to resist or escape again, the academy will have to take the final measure. In the flagship, Yin Shang looked at Su Changping beside her and couldn't help sweating. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 504. Her mission is to bring back the kidnapped honorary professor. But Su Changping's mission is obviously not like this. As the fleet commander, Su Changping's tasks are highly linked to the scientific research department. Therefore, the Zaiwu is Su Changping's primary target. If those intruders really don't cooperate. When it is confirmed that the meridian cannot be retrieved safely, the Tiangong fleet will inevitably destroy it first to ensure that the Institute's research data will not be leaked. But when things have developed to this point, Yinshang can't say much anymore. She could only stand quietly next to Su Changping, praying that things would not go to the worst direction. Inside the Zaiwu, they watched the communication from the Tiangong fleet. Grandma Zuza sighed. It seems that it has developed to the worst situation. Fortunately we are lucky. As she spoke, her old eyes looked towards the asteroid belt outside the meridian. Unknowingly, the rotation speed of those planetary belts seemed to have become much faster. Due to the characteristics of the world, there will be a wave of meteorites in this world every 1,000 years or so. And we just happened to catch this wonderful sight. As Grandma Zuza finished speaking, the whole world seemed to suddenly fall into violence. The rotation speed of the asteroid belt is getting faster and faster. With the accumulation of potential energy, the destructive power of the high-speed rotating asteroids at this moment is no less than the shells fired from the naval guns. Oops! The Tiangong fleet realized this very quickly. But compared to the cosmic environment that changes at a moment's notice, it's still too late. Just when Su Changping was about to order countermeasures, the rotation of the asteroid belt had already become a climate change. Boom boom boom. Stalled spaceships were hit by a large number of asteroids. Without any defensive measures being activated in time, some spacecraft were even instantly penetrated and declared scrapped on the spot. I saw a figure flying out of the scrapped spaceship. Watching a person who had not yet had time to put on protective clothing was suffocated to death in the vacuum environment. Gao Qiang finally felt that something was not quite right. Do we really need to go to this level? Gao Qiang frowned and glanced at everyone in the cabin. Although he is familiar with everyone now and believes that they will not harm him, so far, no one has explained to Gao Qiang why. For example, why do you want to do this to the academy? You should know that from Gao Qiang's point of view, the college never seemed to have launched an attack from beginning to end. But on the contrary, because of this restraint, the academy, as the home field, suffered a lot of losses. Now, because of an accident, many people are about to lose their lives. You will understand everything after a while, Gao Yuan said. The details are difficult to explain now. Only when it actually happens will you understand the intention of what we are doing now. But Gao Qiang wanted to say something more, but was interrupted by Zinke. "They are losers," Zinke sighed. "If they could, they might be able to help us, but they can't. Just because they are losers." As he spoke, the meridian seemed to have passed through some barrier. Relying on the slow conventional cosmic speed, the meridian finally succeeded in escaping from the Academy's control area. But at this time, the Tiangong fleet, which launched a timely defense behind them, also caught up. Asteroids and meteorites are still hitting the hull of the Tiangong fleet, but they are nothing in front of the well-prepared Tiangong fleet. Inside the flagship, Su Changping clenched his fists tightly and his eyes were bloodshot. At the same time, he also issued his first attack order. "Notify everyone, fire freely." He never expected that a simple pursuit mission could actually cause considerable losses to the Tiangong fleet. Those corpses forever buried in the asteroid belt were all elite crew members of the Tiangong fleet not long ago. This is also something Su Changping cannot accept at all. He admitted that he underestimated the invaders. But he, Su Changping, would not make the same mistake again. At this moment, the furious Su Changping was red-eyed and just wanted to crush all the thieves in the Zaiwu. But faced with the Tiangong fleet approaching again, Gao Qiang felt that everyone in the cabin of the Meridian was relieved. Gao Yuan even turned on the countdown function unhurriedly. 3-2-1. As the countdown ended, the Tiangong fleet, which was about to launch an attack, suddenly stopped in place. No, not just the Tiangong fleet. Gao Qiang looked around and saw that everything including the moving asteroids stopped moving. Immediately afterwards, all the scenes began to rewind. The Tiangong fleet is moving backward, and the asteroid is also rotating in the direction it came from. The crew members floating in the vacuum re-entered the cabin, and the damaged parts of the ship were automatically repaired after an asteroid passed through them again. This seems to be just the beginning. The next scenes become faster and faster. All the ships in the Tiangong fleet were restored to intact condition and moved backwards. Soon, the entire fleet completely disappeared. As you can see, they are trapped in the cycle of time. Gao Yuan seemed to be used to what had just happened in the academy. While adjusting the parameters of the meridian, he explained to Gao Qiang, the academy was defeated. It was defeated miserably many years ago. It's just that they are trapped in the time cycle and are completely unaware of it. Gao Qiang was stunned for a moment. In other words, if we fail to leave the academy in time, we will be trapped in the cycle forever. Yes, Gao Yuan nodded, this is why I don't want to communicate with them. Any communication requires time cost. And in this cycle, we don't have extra time to waste. By the way, the spaceship we are on now will not last long. Gao Yuan pointed to the control panel of the spaceship. I saw that the code he had just entered had already shown signs of partial regression. Thanks to the experimental time technology equipped by the Academy on this ship. Otherwise, according to the law of time cycle, if the time cycle is not broken, anything trapped in the cycle will disintegrate instantly once it leaves the fixed area. As for now, Gao Yuan looked at Zinke. Zinke nodded and took over the conversation. I have arranged a piece of temporarily safe land for the Lord. With 401 calculation coordinates, we should be able to get there before the spaceship is completely scrapped. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shida Di. Chapter 505. What do you mean by preparing a safe land for me? Gao Qiang couldn't help asking. I just came to the infinite battlefield and haven't done anything yet, but someone wants to kill me. No one wants to kill you. Xin Qi shook his head. In fact, no one has the ability to do anything to you now. As he said that, Xin Qi looked at the control panel of the meridian. At this moment, with the help of 401, the meridian has confirmed a coordinate in the infinite battlefield. Confirmed coordinates, preparing for jump. Taking advantage of this time, Xin Qi turned his head and looked at Gao Qiang. I once made a promise to a group of people to tell them the truth about the war game. Do you want to listen first, Lord? The truth about the war game, Gao Qiang murmured. He seemed to have heard someone mention this. Yes, it was what he heard from the members of the secret society before he went to the infinite battlefield. Gao Qiang was not interested at the time. But now that Xin Qi mentioned it again, Gao Qiang couldn't help but nodded. If you want to say it. Actually, there's nothing to say. Zinki's eyes drifted into the distance, and before the meridian jumped to a certain coordinate, he told a story. That was a long, long time ago. In Zinki's story, that was a very chaotic era. Countless civilizations were born from the buds, step by step towards glory, and then fell into desolation and were replaced by new civilizations. At that time, there was no distinction between races, and there were no friends. As long as the civilizations have contradictory ideas, even if they belong to the same race, they will fight to the death. Even the same civilization may have a gap in the road of development because of taking two completely different paths. By the way, this split on the road of progress is the technology tree you are familiar with, Zinki explained. Speaking of this, Gao Qiang also thought of the technology tree content he saw in the feudal era. His technology tree was split into two halves from the root, one half developed towards black gunpowder, and the other half developed theology to the peak. According to Zinki, if this action occurs in the era he mentioned, a massacre between brothers will surely break out. This cycle repeats itself, with the next generation pushing the previous one, and the extinction of countless generations of the previous wave in exchange for the surging of the next wave. In countless generations of civilization, all civilizations are moving forward step by step. From planets to galaxies, and then from galaxies to the universe. In the end, they touch the dimensions, planes, and even the multiverse, everything they can imagine. The power of civilization transcends physics, space, and even the laws. It was at this time that civilization finally met an enemy that it could not surpass, Zinki said. Wait, let me guess, Gao Qiang interrupted him. Is it time? Yes. Zinki glanced at Gao Qiang and nodded in response. The expansion of civilization cannot be stopped, and the greed of civilization is endless. All civilizations that stopped or gradually declined and regressed eventually fell on the beach on the coast. Those higher and more turbulent waves will step over their bodies and continue to move forward. But this ultimately led to civilization reaching out to areas that it should not have reached. Time. Zinki slowly closed his eyes, as if thinking about something. From the moment the first civilization that touched time suddenly disappeared, no one realized the seriousness of the problem. Until more and more achievements of civilization entered the long river of time, angering the concept called time. All the strongest civilizations within the known range were annihilated in an instant, and even their history could not be left behind. At that time, some secondary civilizations that had just touched time technology realized the horror of time. Zinki sighed. Time does not have the strongest fortress that can resist all attacks in the world. There is no most powerful gun that can break through all fortresses in the world. But they exist in the past and present of a civilization at the same time, and they are everywhere. In other words, can they go to the past of a civilization? Just hearing this sentence, Gao Qiang realized how terrifying time is. It is really easy for them to kill a civilization. If the first flame discovered by humans is extinguished, will human civilization still exist? The same is true for other civilizations. To destroy their civilization, there is no need for any powerful weapons that modify the laws of physics or replace the laws. Just let the wind blow away a flower, let water put out a fire, or let a playful child take an apple from a tree. Civilization will take a completely different path. The cabin fell into silence. After a while, Star Wizard moved the story to the next part. Although the civilizations that have studied time the most deeply have all disappeared in the long river of time. But those subtop civilizations that have just come into contact with time have fortunately escaped a reckoning because of their own weakness. But those civilizations also know that they have already reached out to time and have already entered the countdown for the survival of civilization. They may be liquidated by time at any time. So, they chose to strike first. Countless theories emerged during that period, and countless races or civilizations put aside their barriers and united together. The academic school represented by the college is the best among them. In the beginning, the academy used all its wisdom to create infinite computers one after another. The mission of those infinite computers is to completely calculate time. The leaders of the academy believe that once infinite computers successfully parse time, they will become equal to time. At that time, the college will transcend the long river of time and will no longer be affected by the concept of time. Zinke said this, but Gao Qiang already knew the fate of the academy from previous events. They failed, Gao Qiang asked knowingly. Right. Zinke nodded, the academy's theory is completely achievable, and infinite computers do have the ability to analyze time. But the leaders of the college forgot one thing, that is, they didn't have time from the beginning to the end. So the academy that controls the infinite level computer was trapped in time for a month, repeating itself over and over again, infinitely reincarnating, and could no longer move forward. Etc. Gao Qiang suddenly interrupted Zinke. Speaking of which, I still have a question. Since the academy is trapped in a month forever, what is their influence in the war game? Faced with this question, Zinke raised the corners of his mouth and smiled slightly. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 506. This requires mentioning another plan at the same time. I just said that it is not just the academy that takes measures against time, but countless races and civilizations. So there are countless different solutions. The plan I'm going to talk about next is the most successful one. Some civilizations call this plan the funnel plan, and some civilizations call it a dome, a training ground, a hiding place, or something else. There are so many different races and civilizations involved in this project that it's known by different names among different races. But if you go by the name you're most familiar with, it should be called War Games. At this time, Gao Yuan next to him suddenly interrupted. I'll let you explain the content of the war game. I saw him opening the light curtain, and countless cantilevers appeared in the light curtain. Immediately afterwards, Gao Yuan took over Zinke's words and opened his mouth to explain the logic of the war game. The war game is actually a game agreed between various races. Those subtop civilizations that were lucky enough to survive in the face of time united through their own means to compress countless multiverses into a singularity. Finally, they will use their first glimpse of the time technology to formulate rules for this singularity. In the rules of this game, even time cannot do much beyond the rules. The purpose of each civilization is very clear. Even if they will eventually perish, they must leave their own fire. And I look forward to these fires one day igniting a prairie fire and returning to the infinite battlefield with an unrivaled attitude. It was from that moment on that the concept of hostility between races emerged. Those who are warlike will be in danger, and those who forget to fight will perish, Gao Yuan said. The power of time is infinite. Even the rules set by various civilizations for war games will one day be worn away by time. So the major civilizations, as the first races of war games, have set up mutually hostile rules for war games. Surrounded by countless powerful enemies, any racial civilization will be tempered enough and will never forget the concept of danger. At the same time, they are also ready to beat the odds. As he spoke, the light curtain in Gao Yuan's hand changed. Countless cantilevers contracted into a singular point, and that singular point erupted with extremely strong suction, continuously pulling matter from the outside world. This is the hope that each civilization has prepared, Gao Yuan began to describe. According to Gao Yuan's description, This singularity is not a completely sealed space. On the contrary, this singularity is set up with the concept of material constancy. Whenever a lord leaves the singularity with something, the singularity will absorb some matter outward to make up for the loss. That is, every time a lord brings a universe from war games to infinite battlefield, the singularity will also absorb matter from the outside universe at the same time to fill the vacancy inside. If this is all, it cannot be called a hope of defeating time. And this involves another concept of academicism. The world of infinite battlefield is infinitely huge. Even if these civilizations unite together, they are far from peeking into the boundaries of the infinite battlefield. So the academics came up with another hypothesis. That is, time is not the strongest existence, or time is only one of the strongest existences. The infinite battlefield has the power to compete with time, but many civilizations have not discovered it. As long as the singularity continues to absorb matter from the outside world, one day, the power that can defeat time will enter the singularity. Perhaps even the academics didn't realize that their idea was correct. Gao Yuan looked at Gao Qiang. Some of the strange powers in the infinite battlefield are gradually being absorbed into the war game. It became a miracle. Of course it's much more than that. Gao Yuan reached out and pointed to Wei Meng, who was listening quietly on the side. Over the long years, some races that do not belong to that group of civilizations have gradually entered the war game. Dreamweaver, for example, didn't exist in the original war game. Wei Mei's eyes widened and she pointed at herself blankly. Does this mean that I am the real victim of this war game? Although she had no memory of the war game, she felt so wronged when Gao Yuan said this. Originally, he was hunting prey and humming songs, living freely every day, but in the end, he was suddenly caught and taken into the cafeteria. From then on, I ate to my death every day. That is to say, their dreamweavers are a noble mythical race. If it were a human being, his waistline would have increased 3 times, right? Thinking like this, Wei Meng subconsciously pinched his thin waist. You won't gain any meat by eating this way, so it's great not to be human. Gao Yuan rolled his eyes at the wet dream. I was about to continue saying something. I heard the coordinate arrival prompt from 401. Byte. The original coordinates have been arrived. This is 401. Is there anything else you need help with? Boom. There was a knock on the table. Everyone turned to look, only to find that Zinki's expression had changed. The coordinates have arrived. Looking out the window at this moment, there is nothing at all, only endless darkness. Zinki himself knows his own arrangements. How could a place without even starlight be the safe zone he arranged? Yes, the coordinates have arrived. 401 continued to confirm. At this time, Gao Yuan didn't care about telling any stories. His hands were operating rapidly on the control panel of Meridian. Emit quantum dot light emitters. Soon Meridian extended 2 leads and released imperceptible quantum dots near the hull. As the quantum dots gathered and created a spectrum system, the strong light instantly illuminated the entire star field. At the same time, everyone on Meridian also saw the planet below the spacecraft. This planet has no atmosphere, and the liquid in the planet has long solidified. However, the more Gao Qiang looked at this planet, the more familiar he felt. 401, help us dock the spacecraft. Okay, looking for a suitable docking point. 401 responded, and then Meridian began to approach the surface of the planet. Finally, it stopped at a place Gao Qiang was very familiar with. This was the place where he was before going to the war game. You can even see the statue fragments that fell off when the saint was broken. I'm going out for a while, Xin Qi said with suppressed emotions. Then, regardless of the severe cold outside, his figure disappeared in the cabin of the Meridian. When Xin Qi returned again, he had a pen in his hand, a pen that was completely frozen and full of cracks. This was exactly the miracle item that Gao Qiang wanted to get, the invisible pen. It's a pity that it can no longer transform itself. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Me Shi Da Di. Chapter 507. Crack. After being taken into the cabin, the invisible pen shattered into cracks under the eyes of everyone due to the slow temperature rise. Zinky's eyes dimmed. What's wrong? Gao Qiang couldn't help asking. It was the first time he saw Zinky so depressed. When Zinky's altar was blown up, Zinky was not so depressed. We failed. As he spoke, Zinky clenched the remains of the invisible pen in his hand. I have prepared a universe for you, which will be the only thing you can rely on after you come to the infinite battlefield. But, as I said in the story just now, time controls the past and the future. Now time has advanced us one step, allowing this universe to reach the end, that is, the moment when it returns to death. So my story has ended at the beginning. Hee, can we only say that it is worthy of time? The remains of the invisible pen in his hand shattered on the ground. Zinky frowned, and his fists clenched tighter and tighter. Gao Yuan saw the scene and shook his head slowly. It's not the first time we failed, why is it so? Let me explain it. Then, Gao Yuan turned around and looked at Gao Qiang seriously. When you come to the infinite battlefield, you are destined to take over a war for time. This is also what every lord who knows the truth must face. 401, you know where to go next. Okay. As Gao Yuan gave the order, 401 replied briefly, and the meridian made another jump. This time the jump speed was very fast. After only one jump, 401 received a prompt that the destination had arrived. And as the coordinates arrived, strong light shone into the meridian's cabin, and countless mysterious runes appeared in the cabin. Yi Meng saw the scene and reached out to touch the rune. But the next moment, the entire meridian suddenly disappeared. As a result, everyone stood on the jade-paved ground. Its time is up, Gao Yuan explained. While there is still time, Lord, please follow me. We will talk while walking. After the words fell, Gao Yuan walked to the front of the team and led the way. Gao Qiang quickly followed Gao Yuan's footsteps while looking at the surrounding environment. Solemn, majestic, gorgeous, almost every word of praise that can be imagined seems to be suitable for use here. At this time, Gao Yuan also introduced, this is the Temple of Time. Time will also build a temple for itself. Gao Qiang was a little surprised. He didn't expect that a conceptual existence like time would actually covet the incense and offerings of the so-called gods. However, Gao Yuan shook his head. On the contrary, this was created by many top civilizations at that time. Gao Yuan continued to tell the story that had just been interrupted. As the story said, countless civilizations came up with countless plans to deal with time and try to keep their own civilizations going. Most of these plans failed miserably. But there are always a few plans that play their due role. The ground Gao Qiang is currently standing on is a plan that is almost as successful as the war game. This involves another faction at the time, the Shen Nian faction. The analysis plan of the academic school is simply unreasonable in the eyes of the Shen Nian faction. They believe that they have a way to deal with the crisis of time, that is, to build a temple for time. This temple is the throne they built for time, and it is also the cage they carefully prepared for time. Once they force the power called incense on time, the concept of time will be trapped in this small temple and can no longer affect the outside world. They succeeded, at least they think they succeeded, Gao Yuan said. Gao Qiang was a little confused. What do you mean? That is to say, they failed? No, they succeeded, Gao Yuan corrected. They successfully trapped time in this temple, but at the moment they succeeded, time was angered again. Most of the top civilizations were annihilated in that catastrophe. Only some civilizations that made sufficient plans and preparations were able to preserve their 1 in a billion history with difficulty. Later generations also called those civilizations that can still be observed from history pioneers. Ahem. Gao Qiang coughed softly. Master Yuan, you seem to have gone off topic. So since they succeeded, why do you say they think they succeeded? And, about time. Gao Qiang didn't say anything else. Time had found him many times, which proved everything. They were not trapped in this prison cell. Gao Yuan's pace did not stop, but his eyes gradually became deeper. Because the Shen Nian sect made a mistake in their calculations. Time is eternal, but the temple they built for time is not, and the incense burning in the temple is even less so. The temple seems to have trapped time, but it is meaningless. I think that's why time allowed them to trap it. Because time doesn't even bother to respond to their methods, they are far from worthy. Speaking of this, Gao Yuan stopped. Because there was no road in front of the crowd. There was only an extremely huge door. Gao Yuan stretched out his hand and slowly pushed forward. With just a light touch, the door opened to both sides with a bang. I'm sorry, Lord. Gao Yuan apologized slowly in an old voice. The interference of time caught us off guard. Even the story written by Zinke ended early under the intervention of time. Therefore, you will be the first lord to challenge the Temple of Time with nothing since the beginning of the war game. Feeling the atmosphere gradually pessimistic, Gao Qiang forced a smile and said, how could it be? Even if every lord who knows the truth has to face time, you are still with me, right? How can this be considered as having nothing? No. Gao Yuan interrupted Gao Qiang slowly. The cause and effect between me and you ended when I pushed open this door. Gao Qiang's smile froze on his face. What does it mean? It means, have you ever thought about why I'm called Gao Yuan? I just happen to have the same surname as you, and for no reason, I'm doing my best to help you. Is there a possibility? Gao Yuan never existed. When the voice fell, Gao Yuan's figure suddenly became erratic, and disappeared like smoke. Clang! An infinite echo fell where Gao Yuan was originally standing. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shida Di. Chapter 508. Gao Yuan doesn't exist? As if realizing something, Gao Qiang turned around suddenly and saw the kind smile of Grandma Zuzu. Sorry, child. If possible, Grandma will do her best to create a world where children can live without worries. But Grandma can't do it. After saying this, Grandma Zuzu's figure also disappeared like Gao Yuan. Similarly, an infinite echo fell to the ground. Seeing this scene, Zinke seemed to be relieved. Forget it, failure is failure. After being completely relieved, Zinke did not hesitate to reveal Gao Qiang's biggest shortcoming. Every lord who came here has experienced the baptism of blood and fire. But you are different. You are like the most fragile flower in the greenhouse. You must be under our care to get here now. But even so, I am willing to respect your next choice. Zinke seemed to want to say something else. But it was too late. The cause and effect between him and Gao Qiang only stayed at the moment. Clang, another infinite echo fell to the ground. Gao Qiang finally turned his eyes to Qin Sui and Disaster. As expected, the two just waved goodbye to Gao Qiang, and finally turned into infinite echo and fell to the ground. Everyone, don't they actually exist? Just when Gao Qiang was gradually confused, a cold hand was placed on his shoulder. Gao Qiang turned his head and looked at his shoulder. It turned out to be Yimeng. It doesn't matter, it's just time, it just happens that I have never eaten the concept of time, Yimeng comforted. When we take down this temple, we will find your so-called people. When the time comes, stew 2 pots of time, Lord, One steamed and one spicy. Yi Meng's words sounded frivolous, as if she didn't take the Time Lord seriously. But Gao Qiang could see from Yi Meng's expression that she was not as relaxed as her tone. Yi Meng's forehead was already dripping with cold sweat. This is exactly the same as when she faced chaos. But time is obviously much more terrifying than chaos. Is Yi Men really willing to accompany him into the Temple of Time? Is it voluntary, or is it forced by the power of miracles? Gao Qiang subconsciously wanted to check Yi Men's loyalty to him, but failed. Only then did he realize that he had left the war game. In the real world, loyalty cannot be measured in specific numbers. I can let you go, Gao Qiang suddenly said. As long as you are no longer placed on my path, you should be able to regain your freedom. That's right, it's not just Gao Yuan and others. After learning the truth about the infinite battlefield, Gao Qiang himself didn't believe that he could win. Entering the Temple of Time almost laid the foundation for his failure. In this case, he didn't need to force others to die with him. Perhaps this was Gao Qiang's last kindness before his death. However, what Gao Qiang didn't expect was that Yi Men sneered and rejected the proposal without any hesitation. She raised the other hand that was not on Gao Qiang's shoulder and gently raised a finger. Stars moved around at the fingertips. Don't think I don't know what you are thinking, but I can tell you clearly that time is nothing in my eyes. I am not afraid of them at all. So I don't need your pity, and I won't leave here. I am determined to enter this Temple of Time. The firm words seemed to bring some confidence to Gao Qiang. At the same time, Gao Qiang felt warm in his heart. He couldn't see the loyalty of Yi Men now, but to be honest, are some numbers really important? Even in the original territory, it doesn't mean that every citizen maintained absolute loyalty to Gao Qiang. A gentleman judges by deeds, not by heart. Since Yi Men is willing to accompany Gao Qiang into the Temple of Time, Gao Qiang naturally won't doubt the motives of her behavior. Even if the scene of the stars on the fingertips just now was just a bluff created by Yi Men using the means of weaving dreams. By the way, why are your hands shaking? Gao Qiang glanced at Yi Meng's arm on his shoulder. Am I shaking? Yi Meng decisively retracted his arm and put it behind his back, his eyes constantly wandering around. Ha ha ha, maybe you saw it wrong. Stare. Gao Qiang stared at Yi Meng's face for 2 seconds, and only retracted his gaze when Yi Meng became a little nervous. No more jokes with Yi Meng. Gao Qiang once again focused all his attention on the huge door of the temple in front of him. At this moment, even the meridian disappeared because of time. Even if he wanted to leave, he couldn't leave. Forget it, let's die. Gao Qiang gritted his teeth, picked up the infinite echo dropped by Gao Yuan and others, and walked into the door with a fearless attitude. Hey! Yi Meng's voice came from behind Gao Qiang. Then Gao Qiang felt his feet fall, and after crossing the door, he fell directly downwards. Yi Meng withdrew his hand awkwardly. I was just about to remind you that there is no way behind the door. But Gao Qiang didn't come up for a long time. Yi Men also gritted his teeth and broke into the door. Ah! This is different from the war game. During the war game, Gao Qiang knew that he would eventually land in the territory. But he didn't understand what was happening in this Temple of Time. Gao Qiang didn't know how long he screamed before the endless feeling of falling finally stopped. He opened his eyes carefully. Am I still alive? At this moment, he was stepping on a road paved with several floating stone slabs. Gao Qiang breathed a sigh of relief. He almost thought that he would be killed in this temple without the Lord of Time appearing. At this time, Yi Meng's unpleasant voice came from Gao Qiang's ears. Can't you wait for me? Gao Qiang tilted his head to look. Yi Meng stood angrily on his left-hand side, and his anger even covered his fear. With a wave of his hand, countless stone steps rose out of thin air. The ability to weave dreams is really useful. Gao Qiang didn't know how many times he had sighed like this. He could actually use dreams to change the environment in the Temple of Time. Yimen is simply an all-rounder, fully worthy of the title of a mythical race. But where should we go now? Gao Qiang looked at the endless void around him. Since he and Yimen fell because of stepping on the air, the door of the temple has disappeared. At this moment, there is nothing around, and without any reference, it is even impossible to distinguish between east, west, south and north. However, just when Gao Qiang had this doubt, in the Temple of Time, countless pictures pointing to the past and the future appeared from nowhere. Then, like a stream, they surrounded the two sides of the stone slab created by Yimen. From these pictures, Gao Qiang saw the infinite echoes piled up as high as a mountain. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 509. Infinite echoes are the result of the death of the miracle Lord. So, what exactly happened here? Gao Qiang thought this, but the scene in front of him changed again. A stream of light appeared from the long river, passed through Gao Qiang's body, and gradually formed a human body without facial features. Coming. The human body made an ethereal sound and reached Gao Qiang's ears. This voice seemed to turn on some kind of switch. Suddenly, countless fluid human shapes gush out from the long river. From the surfaces of those shapes, images of the past and future of the world can still be vaguely seen. After being stunned for a second, Wet Dream suddenly came to his senses. Be careful, they are time. Time. Gao Qiang was a little puzzled when he heard what Wei said. Because he once saw the appearance of time, and it cannot be said to be exactly the same as it is now, it can only be said to be completely unrelated. But seeing the determined look of the Wet Dream, Gao Qiang's expression also became serious. Wet Dream, can you lend me your power? Now that everyone is gone, this is Gao Qiang's only chance to gain combat effectiveness. Good. Wet Dream didn't object. At the moment when Wei Meng agreed, Gao Qiang once again felt the power of Dreamweaver. From the perspective of the Dreamweaver, the entire Temple of Time has changed slightly from the human perspective. Gao Qiang can see more clearly the images that flash past in the long river of time. You can also feel the attitude shown by the fluid figures above the river towards you at this moment. It's not hostility, and there's no intention to attack. Of course, fear does not exist. Gao Qiang could feel only banter from those fluid figures. When they looked at themselves, they didn't seem to be facing any enemies at all. It's more like the audience outside the stage is watching the monkey juggling in the center of the stage. How shameful and angry this playful gesture is. But there's nothing you can do, right? One of the fluid figures suddenly asked jokingly. Gao Qiang was suddenly shocked. Because he didn't say anything at all. I'm just answering questions you may ask in the future, the figure continued. Gao Qiang's face instantly became gloomy. He's really a disgusting guy who messes around with other people's futures. The figure laughed out loud. Don't get me wrong, we are just living in the future and the present at the same time. We have never pried into your thoughts alone. Of course, with low-level biological forms like you, I'm afraid you will never be able to understand what we mean. At this time, the other figures in the temple also looked at Gao Qiang and Wei Meng, and discussed without hesitation. Is the life that comes this time the concept of a dream? Weaker. This must be the weakest time, right? Maybe this will be the last time. Seeing that the figures on the river were still talking to each other, Wei Meng finally couldn't help but say, "Hey, you, are you looking down on others a little too much?" Only then did those figures turn their attention to the two of them again. "Eternal, are you going to tell them this time?" a figure said. "I'll do it." The voice fell. Among the countless flowing figures, one suddenly flew out and rushed towards Gao Qiang. Listening to the other party's disdainful tone, feeling the other party's arrogant attitude, Wei Mei gritted her teeth and said, "Take it as if I don't exist." Wei Meng raised his hand and waved, and countless threads suddenly emerged from the void and wrapped around the flying figure. However, none of those threads successfully wrapped around the other party's body. In the end, I could only watch the figure stop between Gao Qiang and Wet Dream. Only then did Yang Heng turn his head, seemingly looking at the thread behind him. A woven dream. Unfortunately, even in a dream, the time has not yet come. As he said that, he turned his head and looked at each other with Gao Qiang. We meet again. Gao Qiang looked at the flowing body in front of him and said slowly. The last time you were frightened by us and ran away in a hurry, it really seems like yesterday. He had understood the identity of the visitor since other times called it eternity. Yes, we meet again. Yang Heng could hear the sarcasm in Gao Qiang's tone, but his mood didn't change at all. Do you want me to introduce you to another friend that you and I are familiar with? Who? Eternal waved back, and soon another fluid figure appeared next to Gao Qiang. Paradox. Gao Qiang's expression changed after hearing Yang Heng's words. Isn't he dead? In the original war game, the war game had clearly prompted the Lord Paradox to die. If this is not an eternal bluff, then there is only one possibility left. That's right, time will never die. Yang Heng opened his mouth to answer before Gao Qiang asked the question, without even giving Gao Qiang a chance to ask the question. Then, he added, as long as time exists, we will exist forever. Because we are the concept of time. This sentence also made Gao Qiang's face look even more ugly. Because every time the power revealed by time is stronger, his hope of victory will be reduced by 1 point. If the seal is a joke to time, and time cannot be eliminated, then what other ways can be used to defeat time? What is so special about him? Gao Qiang suddenly had an idea. He suddenly realized that he did not seem to be from this world. Will this be the key to changing the situation? Because compared to other people, the time before he crossed over to this world should not exist. However, at this moment, Paradox suddenly spoke. Do you remember the picture I showed you at that time? What do you mean? Gao Qiang suddenly had a bad premonition. Sure enough, Paradox waved his hand towards the long river of time, and a city that Gao Qiang was extremely familiar with appeared in front of Gao Qiang. High-rise buildings, busy traffic. Isn't it the city where Gao Qiang once lived? Last time, you didn't let me continue to project the sequel, Paradox said lightly. As the picture gradually fast-forwarded, Gao Qiang's bad premonition became stronger and stronger. Until in the picture, figures suddenly appeared in every corner of the suburbs of the city. Demons, undead, goblins, dragons. Countless races seemed to suddenly come to this ordinary city. Gao Qiang also swallowed his saliva at this time. Are those game lords? Of course, Paradox nodded. After the lords came, they raised their butcher knives to the city without hesitation. Then, Gao Qiang suddenly found that he could see the data panel floating above the head of each lord in the picture. In just 2 weeks, they slaughtered more than 80% of the population of the entire city. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 510. Because he could see the data panel. Gao Qiang could naturally see that every time the lords killed a group of humans in the city, some strange items would appear. Until then, the fantasy that Gao Qiang had originally held had completely dissipated. So, is the truth of his so-called crossing like this? No wonder Wei Yan didn't want him to continue watching at that time. Because as long as Gao Qiang continued to watch, he would find that the world where he had beautiful memories was actually just a battlefield that had not yet been opened. It's just that there were no human lords participating in that battlefield. The humans living in the city were just neutral monsters that were no different from wild boars and wolves. Perhaps the building where Gao Qiang lived was a monster's nest with good rewards, waiting for the lords who came to clean it up. In a trance, Gao Qiang felt something shattered in his mind. Don't think about it. At this time, Yi Meng held Gao Qiang's hand tightly. Her eyes looked directly at Gao Qiang's face, but she didn't focus on Gao Qiang's expression. She was looking at something deeper. I saw, your dream was broken. After being awakened by the dream, Gao Qiang realized that the power of the dream weaver he borrowed had completely left him. Even if he borrowed it from the dream again, the power would not return again. Don't try again. You have to know that the broken dream means death for the dream weaver. The dream gritted his teeth and said. She didn't breathe a sigh of relief until she observed that Gao Qiang didn't look like he was about to die. It seems that there is still a difference between humans and dream weavers. Although Gao Qiang's dream was easily broken, as a human, the broken dream would not lead to Gao Qiang's direct death. However, the dream still pulled Gao Qiang away and looked at the Eternity and Paradox vigilantly, who had never shown an attacking posture. Time is really so terrifying. There is no hostility, but every step they take has weakened Gao Qiang. Because Gao Qiang's power is completely taken from the dream. After being unable to use the power of the Dreamweaver, it means that the overall combat power of the two people has been directly reduced by half. Gao Qiang, who entered the Temple of Time with nothing, has completely lost the power to protect himself. What a good plan! Gao Qiang clenched his fists and said. The composition of dreams is extremely complex. It is much more difficult to defeat a dream than to kill a person. But the Time Lord can grasp the weakness of dreams. They know that Gao Qiang understands that all his memories are just the time before a neutral monster dies. This is enough to defeat the last point in Gao Qiang's heart, the arrogance of the time traveler. The hope of defeating time is even slimmer. This also makes Gao Qiang start to doubt. From beginning to end, did he really have any hope to defeat time? Something that countless top civilizations have not been able to do. How can he, a human being, no, a neutral monster that is not even a human lord, do it? Until then, Eternity and Paradox still did not make any attacking moves. Even though Gao Qiang was extremely weak at this moment because of his confusion. Not only Eternity and Paradox. The countless Time Lords standing on the long river of time still maintained a playful look, watching Gao Qiang's situation here. They were not afraid that Gao Qiang would suddenly attack. Because they did not care about any threats that Gao Qiang could bring. We did not expect that you would become as weak as you so quickly, Eternity continued to say. He seemed to want to continue to attack Gao Qiang's spirit and fighting spirit. Yi Men opened her mouth, but could not speak. Because she knew that once she interrupted Eternity's speech, it meant that both sides officially entered the battle. And she was not ready yet. She did not have the courage to defeat time, so she could only watch Eternity continue to speak. Come with me. Eternity called Gao Qiang and wanted to float forward along the steps created by Yi Men. But soon, he found that Gao Qiang did not keep up at all. Okay, Yang Heng sighed helplessly. I know you don't want to listen to me anymore. But you have to understand that the long river of time is flowing. Even if you don't want to accept all this, time will come to you. When Yang Heng finished speaking, Gao Qiang found that even if he didn't move at all, the position where he stood would continue to move forward. Even if he tried to run backwards, he would never be faster than the speed forward. Always moving forward, this seems to be a law of the long river of time. Finally, Gao Qiang gave up. He seemed to feel that Yang Heng smiled when he gave up. That's right, no existence can escape the long river of time, so acceptance is the only thing you can do. And I'm not hurting you. Because next, I will tell you more truth, including why you are here. Listening to Yang Heng's speech, Gao Qiang's face was cold and he said nothing. At this point, he has understood that the so-called truth is not some nectar. The truth is a sharp knife that kills without blood. Eternity waved forward again, and a different picture appeared in the long river of time again. Come and meet your predecessors. Those strong men who once stood before us and confronted us. Of course, this does not include you, Yang Hung added. Soon, the river of time pulled a figure to the most conspicuous position. The figure's face could not be seen clearly. It seemed to be standing in the same place, but it seemed to be everywhere. It was hard to imagine that Gao Qiang actually felt such contradictory feelings of ethereal and heavy from a picture at the same time. He is the master of cause and effect, and the first lord to step into the temple of time, Yang Hung explained nonchalantly. Then Gao Qiang saw that the figure in the river of time pushed open the door of the temple of time. He lost, Gao Qiang seemed to be asking, but he was actually very sure. If he appeared here, then the existence in the river of time must end in failure. Yes, lost. There was some sigh in Yang Heng's tone. He may be the lord who is closest to defeating us. But unfortunately, he can't kill us. Although we can't kill him, we have plenty of time, and he has far less time than we do. In the end, was he killed by time? Gao Qiang understood what Yang Hung meant. Eternal immortality and endless time are really shameless means. But at this time, Yang Hung changed the subject. The master of cause and effect is actually the reason why you came here. Lord of all people, am I the only one in the fallen empire? Author, Mi Shida. Chapter 511. He still has a relationship with me, Gao Qiang asked in surprise. Although he also knows that the truth is a sharp knife. But what I have to say is that every truth Eternal said is almost like a cake covered in poison. Although he knew that the cake was poisonous, his sweet smell kept trying to tempt Gao Qiang to eat it. It's not just related to you. In fact, he is related to every lord who comes after that. Eternity sweeps towards the center of the picture of the long river of time. At this point the scene has progressed to the point where the master of cause and effect has completely admitted defeat. He lost. With his power, it is impossible to consume time in the temple of time. But before the end, he issued a vicious curse on the temple of time. I will use all my strength, use myself as the cause, call all sentient beings as the effect. The cause and effect cycle will be endless, until the temple of time is exhausted and the long river of time hangs upside down. In the picture, after that curse, the master of cause and effect has become extinct in the long river of time. For a normal miracle lord, if he dies in the infinite battlefield, most of his power will dissipate, leaving only one infinite echo to return to the war game. But unexpectedly, when the master of cause and effect died, the power of his own miracle was directly transformed into 9 infinite echoes, floating in the long river of time. His power did not dissipate, but was preserved. What exactly did he do? Gao Qiang turned to Eternity and asked. He understood that Eternity would answer his question. Sure enough, Eternity did not disappoint Gao Qiang. He preserved all his power and used the power of cause and effect to find the next successor. When the successor appears, these powers will show different postures and go to guide and protect each other. It was also his actions that caused more and more lords who should not have come to break into the temple of time. With the explanation of Eternity, the long river of time in front of Gao Qiang continues to flow. New images appear quickly. After the master of cause and effect died, more and more geniuses broke into the infinite battlefield and understood the truth of the war game. Those who exist are all terrifying strong men. Among them, Gao Qiang saw someone destroying the entire universe just to build his own golden throne. Eternal seemed to understand where Gao Qiang was looking, and spoke directly at this moment. The Lord of Gold, his throne remains within the long river of time. If you are interested, I can let you sit on it. Gao Qiang shook his head and continued to watch the scenes in silence. In another picture, a terrifying civilization descended on the infinite battlefield. From the moment it appeared, it exuded an endless sense of threat, causing all things, both static and moving, to continually retreat. Hunter civilization Eternal said, they are actually quite strong. Their hunting target is not just food, all knowledge, technology, and materials are within their hunting scope. Their hunting is never-ending, benefiting themselves at the expense of everything. Wherever they pass, even the toughest rocks will recede out of fear. After thinking for a while, Yang Hung continued, their bodies and bones have probably weathered long ago. As for other things, if you want, you can take some souvenirs with you when you leave. Gao Qiang still shook his head and continued to look behind the long river of time. He saw another lord covered in countless data panels. After breaking into the long river of time in the temple, a date appeared on the panel surrounding him, and as the date went backwards, the long river of time even briefly flowed back for a moment. But, it was only for a short moment. The master of entertainment has created a deeper game within the game. Eternity is still the same attitude. His power even touches the edge of time a little bit. Unfortunately, we are time. No wonder eternity is dismissive of this. No matter how strong the beings in the picture are, those who appear in this long river of time are just losers. Immediately afterwards, Gao Qiang saw countless powerful beings. There are divine fortune tellers who seem to be inscrutable, and there are also scholars who make good use of technology to explore and seek knowledge. All the beings who come to the Temple of Time are thousands of times better than Gao Qiang. But they still failed, defeated in the long river of time, without exception. However, due to the influence of the dominant power of cause and effect, these losers will leave all their strength behind to help the next being selected by the fruit to come to the Temple of Time safely. In the end, the scene Gao Qiang saw at the beginning was formed. Countless infinite echoes pile up into mountains, and I don't know how much sadness of losers is contained in them. After seeing so much, have you noticed? Eternal asked suddenly. Did you notice anything? Gao Qiang seemed a little confused. Really? Yang Hung said the word Quarren inexplicably, and then explained to Gao Qiang. It seems that you haven't noticed that with the arrival of each challenger, these challengers themselves are becoming weaker and weaker. Because every time a challenger fails, they will bear part of the cause and effect, which will lead to the dominance of cause and effect, and the remaining force of cause and effect will become weaker and weaker. The weakened power of cause and effect will no longer be able to find the strongest and most talented candidates. That's why you were chosen. Eternal stretched out his hand and pointed at Gao Qiang. After countless failures, the power of cause and effect has been almost exhausted, and I finally chose you who is good for nothing. If you fail again, the next person chosen by the power of cause and effect may be a pig in the mud. Is this mocking the fact that he is already so weak that he can hardly get any weaker? Although I know that what eternity says is true. But Gao Qiang couldn't help but retort, even a pig will step its mud legs into this temple of time one day, right? Yang Hung turned his figure aside, seemingly amused by Gao Qiang. Why? Just because of the guys who protected you along the way. You think they'll show up again to protect a pig? Stop joking. I just said that the form of protection and guidance provided by the power of cause and effect will vary depending on the Lord. You are the only Lord among the countless lords who have been selected by the power of cause and effect. You are the only one who has used waste to the extreme, and at the same time, you have also used the protection of the power of cause and effect to the extreme. Do you think your success can be replicated? Even as an enemy, Gao Qiang still felt a little embarrassed when he was told this by Yang Hung. He seemed to understand to some extent the principles behind the creation of the fallen empire. Because of his gift, a bon vivant. Birds of a feather flock together and people divide into groups. His will guided the power of cause and effect, turning it into a meticulous protective situation, a group of old people protecting the calf.